To call our revered chiefs and queen mothers, our landlord, the Vice Chancellor of the UPSA, justices of the Supreme Court, Court of Appeal, High Court, members of the Fourth Estate, my brothers and sisters. Lecture. I do so with deep emotion and profound humility, paying tribute not only to a president, but to a teacher, a mentor, and a father figure whose life significantly shaped mine and the lives of many others. As I prepare to share my reflections of Uncle Fifi, I am reminded of former President Muhammadu Buhari's words. He said, "President Atta was a good man, a very good man, one of the very best from our continent." These words capture the essence of the man we honor today. My name is Charlotte Kesson-Smith Osei, and I had the extraordinary privilege of being taught commercial law by Dr. Mills, as he was, at the University of Ghana, Legon, and later company law at the Ghana School of Law. More significantly, in 2011, he appointed me as chairperson of the National Commission for Civic Education, making me the first woman to hold that position in Ghana's history. Today, I speak as a mentee, reflecting on the profound impact of a teacher who saw potential where others saw youth, who offered opportunity where others saw inexperience, and who built bridges where others saw divisions. A theme for this year's memorial lecture is Atta Mills, a case study for the Fourth Republic. I will be approaching this theme through three lenses. I will look at Prof as a man, Prof as a teacher, and Prof as a president. And then I'll share the reflections of a mentee. It's important to look at Prof's character because his character defined everything he achieved, and his character is the reason why we're honoring him today. Prof was born on 21st July 1944 in Takwa, Western Region, and he tragically passed away on July 24th, 2012, just 3 days after his 68th birthday. But in those 68 years, Prof lived a life that exemplified the highest ideals of scholarship, public service, and human dignity. He was born to John Atta Mills Sr., an educationist at Commander Teacher Training College, and Mercy Dawson Amwa. Young Fifi was a second child and the first son among 7 siblings. From his father, we learn that he inherited a love of learning and teaching, and from his mother, he gained the gentle strength that would characterize his leadership style. His educational journey, as we've been told, took him from Huni Valley Methodist Primary School to Commander Methodist Middle School, and then to Achimota School, where he completed his ordinary and advanced level certificates in 1961 and 1963. At the University of Ghana, he completed his Bachelor of Law degree and Professional Law certificate in 1967. Mills's pursuit of higher education took him to the London School of Economics for his LLM in 1968, and then to the School of Oriental and African Studies at the University of London, where he earned his PhD in law in 1971 at the remarkably young age of 27. His selection as a Fulbright scholar to Stanford Law School in 1971 was not merely an academic achievement. It was a testament to Prof's character and potential. The Fulbright program chose him not just for his intellectual capabilities, but for his potential to be a bridge builder and a leader. At Stanford, his colleagues remember him as someone who listened more than he spoke, who asked thoughtful questions, and who approached every challenge with both intellectual rigor and human compassion. He was, in the words of one Stanford professor, a scholar gentleman in the truest sense of the term. Perhaps no quality defined Mills the man more than his humility. In a continent where political leaders are often known for high-handed approaches to power, Mills remained remarkably grounded throughout his life and presidency. His humility was not weakness, it was strength under control. This humility was evident in his famous declaration that I have always said that I will be president for all Ghanaians, whether they voted for me or not, and without consideration for which part of the country they come from. These were not mere campaign promises. They were the words of a man who truly understood that leadership is service and not privilege. His approach to leadership emboldened me personally on 2 occasions to tell him, while he was president, that I thought a decision he took was wrong, and in another case, the decision was unfair because he had not listened to the other party. Typical of Prof, he took the criticism very calmly. We argued as lawyers, and he told me, when you're president, you see things very differently. Eventually, in one of the matters, months later, I got a message from him. He said, you were right and I was wrong. That was an emotional moment for me and a great lesson in leadership. And I did learn that power that fears criticism is already bankrupt. In an era when political integrity often seemed like an oxymoron, Mills stood as a beacon of moral leadership. His integrity was not situational, it was absolute. Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, current president of Nigeria, best captured this aspect of Prof in his tribute when Prof died. He said, President Atta Mills was a man with a profound, comprehensive intellect. Unlike many individuals whose public courage as a politician diverges negatively from their private persona, the private and public morals and practices of this man were undifferentiated. There was no seam dividing the public official from the private man. He was guided by a moral compass that did not waver according to the circumstance. Before President Tinubu knew this, those of us who were his students knew this already. Interesting story from first year. We had decided to go to London over the summer holidays to job. My first challenge, of course, was getting a visa. I went for the visa interview, and the official interviewing me asked me what I was going to do in London for 3 months. I told him I was going to see the sights. And he said, you're a law student. I said, yes. He said, okay. Can I advise you? I said, sure. He said, before you become a lawyer, make sure you become a better liar. I said, thank you. I got my visa, and with my roommates, we went off to London to job. Then the university reopened, and we were late. I managed to get into Ghana before my 2 roommates, and I managed to get myself registered for 2nd year. My 2 roommates came back, and they were told by the dean that they had been deferred for 1 year. One of my roommates, Irama, was actually a niece of Professor Mills, who was vice dean. So we figured, go to Prof's home, go and plead, and of course, if Prof makes a case for Irama, it means everybody else can sneak through. So Irama goes to Mills's house that evening and comes back to our room, very, very angry. We said, what did Prof say? Oh, Prof said, it's only 1 year. It doesn't matter. You can study French or computer during that 1 year. So at that point, everybody else knew that there was no hope. Irama spent the year studying French. So we knew that his approach to corruption was uncompromising. So when he said, I would not spare any government official, be it past or present, who would be found guilty of embezzling state funds, it was not political rhetoric. It was a moral conviction that guided his administration. Prof was also fundamentally a man of peace. This was not passive pacifism, but active peacemaking. He understood that peace was not merely the absence of conflict, but the presence of justice, understanding, and mutual respect. His philosophy of peace was captured in his words: "We are going to ensure that there is peace before, during, and after the election. Because when there is no peace, it's not the elites who will suffer. It's the ordinary people who have elected us into office." When we were students, Prof told my class, this was the peacemaker, that as far as possible, we should make sure we're not the reason for anyone losing their job. Many of my classmates remember this caution. We can't remember what we were talking about. Later in my public life, trying to be the good mentee, I applied this advice to my own significant harm. But the good thing was, Prof was right. There was peace because I took the path of peace. So, peaceful Prof still wins the day. But there's also another story one of the students told me that showed me that although it was good that Prof was peaceful, Prof would have been a very poor litigation lawyer. So, Commonwealth boys went on a protest and misbehaved very badly. In their words, they disciplined a particular student. So the head of their JCR was in trouble. And the student who had been disciplined was a relative of Prof Mills and went to hire Prof as his lawyer. Prof calls the dean of students and says he wants to see the Commonwealth president and ask him that, you people went to do ABC? And he said, yes. Prof said, let me advise you. Go quickly to the student who was disciplined and go and beg and make peace. Because I know it was a prank that went too far, but if it goes to court, you guys can be in a lot of trouble. The guy quickly sneaked there. He didn't even tell Prof that he was also the chief choir master. And he went and he apologized and made peace, and that's how the matter died. So most litigation lawyers would know that this is not the path to making money, but that was Prof. But Prof's character was also shaped by his love of sports and by his being a family man and a Christian. He loved sports. Everyone knew this, particularly hockey. He played for the Ghana national hockey team, and he learned valuable lessons about teamwork, discipline, and fair play. The values from the hockey field, working together toward common goals, respecting teammates and opponents, understanding that individual success means nothing without team success, would later inform his political leadership. Most of my law school colleagues would recall male students gathered around Prof after lectures. They were not discussing law or tax. They were discussing football. That was the measure of the man. Behind the public figure was a devoted family man, married to Ernestina Nadu Mills, with son Kofi Sam, and many siblings and extended family. His approach to family life reflected the same values that guided his public service: love, respect, commitment, and sacrifice. Mills's character was deeply rooted in his Christian faith as a Methodist. His belief in divine providence gave him strength to persevere through political defeats and personal challenges. He genuinely believed that his talents and opportunities were gifts to be used in service of others and not privileges to be enjoyed for personal benefit. The character of John Atta Mills, the man, created the foundation for everything he would accomplish as a teacher and as a president. His humility made him approachable. His integrity earned him trust across divides. His commitment to peace created stability for progress, and his love of learning inspired others to pursue excellence. For most Ghanaians lawyers of my generations, we knew Mills more as a teacher. We are very glad that when Professor Mills returned to Ghana after Stanford Law School, He chose the path of academia and did not pursue more lucrative opportunities in private practice or international organizations. Mill's first formal teaching assignment was as a lecturer at the Faculty of Law at the University of Ghana, Legon. And he would spend the next 25 years in this role, rising to associate prof in 1992. But the real measure of Mills, the teacher, lies not in his academic achievements or the many papers that he authored, though they were considerable. But the real measure was the impact he had on the minds and hearts and lives of his students. Mills taught us that reputation built in silence lasts longer than applause. For Prof, the classroom was more than a venue for transmitting information. It was a sacred space where minds were opened, characters were formed, and futures were shaped. Students who attended his law classes remember a professor who demanded excellence, but provided the support necessary to achieve it. He had very high expectations, and his marks were usually very low. But he also had high investments in our success. Mills understood that teaching law was not just about imparting legal knowledge, it was about developing legal minds. He taught his students not just what to think, but how to think. He emphasized critical analysis, logical reasoning, and ethical reflection. He wanted his students to understand not just the letter of the law, but its spirit and its purpose. He saw law as a tool for addressing social justice or for enabling social justice and national development. He did not see legal education as merely professional training, but as preparation for service to society. Hence his earlier admonition about not being the cause of anyone losing their job. He also emphasized the importance of integrity in legal practice. He understood that as lawyers, we would face situations where we could choose between personal gain and professional ethics. Through his teaching and personal example, he sought to instill in his students the moral foundation necessary to make the choice. And this teaching went beyond the classroom to his approach to everything. Honorable Nana Oye and her friends were living on campus, and Mills was teaching at the law school. His lectures were at 7 a.m. in the morning because he had to lecture before going to the IRS. And he started giving a group of them lifts to Makola. So when there were 2, it was fine. But as word spread, they became 3, and then 4, and then 5. So now, Prof decided that when he gets there, he's not going to decide who gets into his car. The first ones to arrive get the lift. And that was Prof. Always fair, even in the little decisions. While he was an excellent classroom teacher, his greatest impact as an educator came through his mentorship relationships with individual students. Prof had an extraordinary ability to identify potential in young people and to nurture that potential through guidance, encouragement, and opportunity. As one of his students in both commercial law and company law, I experienced firsthand the transformative power of Prof's mentorship. Prof saw something in me that I had not yet seen in myself. He challenged me to think more deeply, to write more clearly, and to aspire more boldly. But more than that, Prof believed in me at a time when I was still learning to believe in myself. Mills was particularly committed to mentoring young women in law, recognizing the barriers we faced and the potential it represented. Lady Julia Osei and myself were 2 young women who probably would not have been able to obtain our Master of Laws degrees without the support of Prof. Mills. He was a constant referee on every young student applicant for graduate work. Through Prof's support, one of my classmates ended up at Prof's alma mater, the London School of Economics, for his LLM. And Prof helped him to get his first job at the Ghana Stock Exchange when he came back home. And for all the students, Prof did not have to know where we came from, who our parents were, he just helped. Prof was always accessible to his students. When I was at Queen's University in Canada, I worked in the library. And one time they were throwing away all the books where they had additional copies. So I asked them, what were they going to do with the books? They said they were going to be trashed. And I said, oh, could I have them for the law faculty? And they said, yes. So I ended up with 48 boxes of books in my apartment. Now, I didn't know how these books were going to get to Ghana. Every week, my landlord would come and look at the boxes and ask me when the boxes were moving. Eventually, I think Prof was at the IRS at the time. I managed to get a message to Prof that I was about to be kicked out of my apartment with 48 boxes of law books. Prof immediately called the High Commissioner. They sent a van, and they picked these 48 boxes of books before my landlord kicked me and the books onto the streets of Kingston, Ontario. That was Prof, always accessible. Beyond all this, Prof was very committed to building the institutional capacity of the Faculty of Law. He wanted Ghanaian students to be able to compete with their counterparts anywhere in the world. But he also wanted us to understand and address the specific legal and development challenges facing Ghana. So as much as Prof would help you to get graduate admissions and go do your master's, Prof would always stay in touch and encourage you to come back home. So his appointments as visiting professor at Temple University in Philadelphia, and he was a visiting lecturer at Leiden University in the Netherlands, enriched his teaching. It also opened up opportunities for us, his students, because most of us got admission to these universities because on the strength of Prof's references. Prof was also a very kind lecturer. He was one of those lecturers who was always giving lifts to his students. There was one particular lift story that happened in my class that was very interesting. Because the three parties in this story are now a Court of Appeal judge and two very respected lawyers, I will not mention their names. So, one day, the one who is now a judge was studying at the law library. He took off his shoes while studying and he fell asleep. Another classmate, let's call him J1, goes and picks his shoes. Then he decides to leave the library and hands the shoes over to J2. It was time for a lecture. J2, rather than leaving the shoes in the library, took the shoes to the lecture room. So our current Court of Appeal judge had to walk barefoot to the lecture room. So he gets to the lecture room, livid, and sees his shoes with J2, and asked J2 how he got his shoes. J2 said, hey, non est factum, not my deed. It was J1 who gave me the shoes. At this time, J1 is sitting in a corner of the lecture room. He knows he's in trouble. And the victim is making signals to show him that he'll get a good beating after class. So class ends, and victim goes to hide by the School of Communication Studies. There were some bushes there, waiting for J1 to come and receive the beating of his life. This would probably have ended up with at least two of them expelled from the law faculty. So J1 is hiding at the law faculty, unable to go back to the hostel. And then luckily for him, Prof used to come evenings to check his mailbox on his way home. Prof comes, law faculty is dark, and Prof is like, what are you doing here? He mumbles something. Prof said, no, you get into my car. So he gets into Prof's car. They drive past the victim still standing in the bushes, and he waves at him, waiting to beat him up. And Prof takes him straight to his hostel, which was out of Prof's way, and then Prof drives off to Legon Hills. And so every time we talk about this, I tell them, certainly one of you would not be a lawyer today and one would not be a judge because you would have all been sent home. But that was the measure of Prof. And that was the kind of relationship Prof had with his students. Perhaps his greatest achievement as a teacher was his role in creating the next generation of legal and political leaders in Ghana. Many of his former students have gone on to distinguished careers in law, business, government, and civil society. They carried with them not just the legal knowledge he had imparted, but also the values and principles he had modeled. My own appointment as chair of the NCC in 2011 was just one example of how Mills continued to mentor and support his former students throughout their careers. He did not see graduation as the end of his relationship with his students, but as the beginning of a new phase of mentorship and support. Even as president, Mills maintained his commitment to education and to young people. His administration's focus on education reform, his emphasis on bringing young people into government, and his continued engagement with students and young professionals all reflected his understanding that leadership was ultimately about teaching and mentoring the next generation. When we talk about Mills bringing his students into government, Professor Kwame Nkrumah likes to remind me that he was also a student of Prof. Mills. But I have spoken to other former students of Prof, and we have unanimously agreed to reject him from that club on the grounds of age. He doesn't qualify, and he's a prof. We are dealing with the young students. So Mills understood that the teacher's role was not just to impart knowledge, but to inspire learning. He wanted to create not just knowledgeable citizens, but thinking citizens who could analyze problems and evaluate solutions and contribute to national development. These traits we see in his path to the presidency and how he served as president. Prof's journey to the presidency was not a straight path, but rather a testament to perseverance, principle, and the democratic process. His political career began in earnest when he was selected as vice president under President Jerry Rawlings in 1997, serving until 2001. This experience provided him with invaluable insights into the workings of government and the challenges of leadership in a developing democracy. His first bid for the presidency in 2000 ended in defeat to John Agyekum Kufuor. Rather than retreating from politics, Mills used this setback as a learning opportunity. His second attempt in 2004 also ended in defeat. But again, he demonstrated the resilience and determination that would characterize his leadership style. It was not until 2008, on his third attempt, that Mills finally achieved his goal of becoming president of Ghana. His victory was narrow, less than 1 percentage point in a runoff election. More importantly, it represented a peaceful transfer of power between political parties, demonstrating the maturity of Ghana's democracy and Mills' commitment to democratic principles. Mills came to the presidency with a clear vision encapsulated in what he called the Better Ghana agenda. This was not merely a campaign slogan for him, but a comprehensive framework for national development that reflected his understanding of Ghana's challenges and opportunities. The Better Ghana agenda was built on several key pillars: economic transformation, social development, good governance, and infrastructure development. But underlying all of this was Mills' fundamental belief that Ghana's greatest resource was its people, particularly its young people. He understood that building a better Ghana required not just better policies, but better leaders. And that meant investing in the leadership development of the next generation. Mills's approach to the Better Ghana agenda was characteristically thoughtful and inclusive. He did not claim to have all the answers, but he rather sought to create a framework within which Ghanaians could work together to find solutions to their common challenges. Perhaps no aspect of Mills's presidency was more revolutionary than his deliberate decision to make his administration what was proudly called a government of the youth and women. This was not tokenism or political calculation, but a fundamental reimagining of what government could and should look like. Mills understood that Ghana's future belonged to its young people, and he believed that they should have a voice in shaping that future. He also recognized that women represented an underutilized resource in Ghana's development, and he was determined to change that. Among the young people Mills brought into his administration were individuals like Atta, Haruna Idrisu, Dr. Manibu Amwa, Felix Ofosu-Kwakye, Samuel Kujetu-Ablakwa, oh, and of course, one of his other students, Professor Kwame Nahoy. Bringing all these young people into public service and politics was not accidental. He deliberately and very intentionally tasked people, including Professor Ho himself, to find student leaders at universities and other smart young people and bring them into governance. He did not just appoint young people, he appointed qualified young people, and then he gave them the support and authority necessary to succeed. He understood that youth empowerment was not about lowering the standards, but about creating opportunities for excellence. Although he selected me to chair the NCC, it was not without several interviews, which he presented as conversations to establish my competence, my vision for the institution, and also that I was not a card-bearing member of any party before he finalized the appointment. The impact of Mills's youth appointments extended far beyond the individuals directly involved. These appointments sent a powerful message to young Ghanaians that their government valued their contributions and believed in their potential. They created role models and inspiration for countless young people who saw that public service was not just for the old and established, but for anyone with the qualifications, commitment, and vision to serve. And where you did not have the vision to serve, like in my case, he found a way to inject that vision into you. You would serve. His approach to youth empowerment was rooted in a broader philosophy of inclusive leadership. He genuinely believed in his often quoted words, "I have always said that I will be a president for all Ghanaians, whether they voted for me or not, and without consideration for which part of the country they come from." It was not political rhetoric. It was a governing philosophy that shaped every aspect of his administration. Mills understood that Ghana's diversity, ethnic, regional, religious, gender, and generational, was a source of strength, not division, but only if that diversity was properly harnessed and included in the governance process. His economic stewardship is also worthy of mention. Prof inherited an economy facing significant challenges, including the global financial crisis of 2008-2009. His response demonstrated both his intellectual rigor and his commitment to evidence-based policymaking. Rather than relying on ideological prescriptions, Mills and his team carefully analyzed Ghana's economic situation and developed targeted interventions. One of the most significant developments during his presidency was the beginning of large-scale oil production in Ghana in December 2010. This presented both enormous opportunities and significant risk. Mills approached this challenge with characteristic thoughtfulness, working to ensure that oil revenues would be used for long-term development rather than short-term consumption. Mills' presidency played a crucial role in consolidating Ghana's democracy. His commitment to democratic principles was evident in his respect for the rule of law and his tolerance of dissent and criticism. Kofi Annan, former UN Secretary General, said of Prof, "Ghanaians must extol the late president because his reign transformed the country as a model of investment possibilities. It cemented political stability, and while presiding over Ghana's first production of oil, he accelerated economic growth for the benefit of this fine West African country. Mills's presidency also marked Ghana's emergence as a respected voice in international affairs. His approach to foreign policy was rooted in his understanding of Ghana's role as a beacon of democracy and stability in Africa. He sought to use Ghana's influence to promote peace, democracy, and development throughout the continent. The president's international engagements reflected his intellectual approach to leadership. He was comfortable discussing complex policy issues with world leaders, bringing to these discussions a deep understanding of both African realities and global trends. How did I know all this? Oh, at some point, early in his presidency, I received a call. A gentleman called Ambassador Baita said he had been sent by the president to come and see me. I was like, okay. Ambassador Baita comes, and first thing he says, are you related to Prof? No. How do you know Prof? I was his student. He said, okay. Prof says I should inform you that he wants you to start writing his speeches. Okay. He now says, I want to see samples of your writing. So I gave him samples of my writing. I think they did their background check, and then he now calls me and he says, Mr. Bebaku Mensah wants to see me. So I go to the castle to see Uncle Bebs, and he tells me how they will engage. Like, these are the terms when we need a lecture, a speech, we will call you, you write, what do you need to do it? And I said I was fine, I didn't need anything. So that's how I started writing Prof speeches under the supervision of Honorable Kofi Totobi Kwachi. So I would write and I'll send it to Uncle KTQ, who would look at it and say, hey, Charlotte, there's no politics in this speech. And then he would infuse it with the politics. Prof's presidency ended tragically with his death in office on July 24, 2012. He literally gave his life in service to Ghana, working until his final day to build the better Ghana he had promised. Prof's death was not just the loss of a president, but the loss of a teacher, a mentor, and a father figure to millions of Ghanaians. The circumstances of his death, dying in office while serving his people, provided a final testament to his character and commitment. He could have stepped down when his health began to fail, but he chose to continue serving until the end. This was not stubbornness or ego, but a deep sense of responsibility to the people who had entrusted him with leadership. Prof's peaceful succession by his vice president, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, demonstrated the strength of Ghana's democratic institutions and the wisdom of Prof's approach to governance. The smooth transition was a tribute to the democratic culture that Mills had helped to nurture and strengthen. Although his presidency was tragically cut short, it left an indelible mark on Ghana and its people. His legacy as president can be measured in many ways. The peaceful elections, the young leaders he empowered, the institutions he strengthened, and the vision he articulated for Ghana's future. But perhaps his greatest legacy as president was his demonstration that leadership could be both effective and ethical, both strong and humble, and both visionary and practical. Prof was not a saint. Like all humans, he had his shortcomings, but we are the better for his having been here. Prof left his family, his students, his mentees, and his country better than he met them, and for that, we are grateful. As I reflect on the life and legacy of Professor John Evans Atta Mills, I am acutely aware that I speak not just as an observer of history, but as a participant in it. My relationship with Prof. Mills spanned multiple phases of both our lives, from my days as a student to speechwriter to my appointment as chairperson of the National Commission for Civic Education, and to the ongoing influence of his teachings on my life and work. I remember when Prof died, one of my colleagues at the NCC told me at a meeting that, as for you, everybody knows your godfather has died. So I think at that point, they all recognized that I was now an orphan. But the journey from student to mentee to public servant was not one I had planned or even imagined when I first entered his classroom. But Prof saw something in me that I had not yet seen in myself. This was his gift, the ability to recognize potential and to nurture it with patience, wisdom, and unwavering support. What made Prof Mills such an effective mentor was his ability to balance guidance with independence. He provided direction when I needed it, but he also encouraged me to think for myself and to develop my own perspectives and approaches. His mentorship was characterized by several key qualities. His accessibility. Despite his busy schedule and growing responsibilities, Prof always made time for his students and mentees. Even as vice president, I remember being at a funeral where Prof saw me and sent someone to drag me over to inquire why I had not come to see him at the castle. Many of my colleagues received similar messages, and we used to ask ourselves whether Prof really knew how hard it was to get into the castle. But he will send those messages. Authenticity. Prof was very genuine in his interactions with his mentees. He did not put on airs or try to impress us with his knowledge or position. He was simply himself, wise, caring, and committed to our success. Prof understood that growth and development take time. He was patient with our mistakes and supportive of our efforts to learn and improve. While supportive, he was not permissive. He was very firm, but he challenged us to think more deeply, to work harder, and to aspire higher. And then he created opportunities for his mentees. He opened doors that might otherwise have remained closed, and he provided platforms for us to demonstrate our capabilities. When Prof offered me the position of chair of the NCC, I was both honored and terrified. There was no excuse I did not come up with in my attempt to decline the role. And Prof's only response was, if we all don't do it, what will become of Ghana? If I think back, even before that, I had inherited Prof's commercial law class at the University of Ghana. That was my first experience as a part-time lecturer. A class of course, nobody told me the class was 300 at the time they were sending me there. But again, I was terrified, but I was not given a choice. I was dropped in the water and I had to swim. But serving under Prof Mills provided me with invaluable lessons in leadership that no textbook or classroom could have taught me. I observed firsthand how he approached complex problems, how he built consensus among diverse stakeholders, and how he maintained his principles while navigating political realities. Prof held many positions of power, which he could have abused for personal gain, or which could have changed how he related with and engaged people. This didn't happen. As a lecturer, Prof was very kind, but very firm and principled. As a tax commissioner, he was the same, focused and firm, but gentle. As president, he was the same, open and engaging. Prof wore the trappings of office very uneasily. The positions never changed Prof. They were essentially vehicles of service. Prof was an exceptional listener who genuinely sought to understand different perspectives before making decisions. He created space for others to share their views, and he would consider their views seriously, even when they differed from his own initial thinking, before he would take a decision. Prof rarely made impulsive decisions or reacted emotionally to challenges. Instead, he gathered information, consulted widely, considered options carefully, and then he would act decisively. President Mills never asked his team to do anything that he would not do himself, and he never compromised his principles for political expediency. He understood that trust was the foundation of effective leadership. And despite holding the highest office in the land, he remained approachable and down to earth. He treated everyone with respect, regardless of their position or status. He was quick to give credit to others and slow to claim credit for himself. And for those who got the opportunity to visit Prof in his private quarters in the castle, you knew that if Prof offered you a drink and you said you wanted a drink, Prof would go open the fridge himself and come and serve you. And then you'd be holding the can of Coke and wondering whether you should drink it or you should just take it home with you. But that was Prof. Even after Prof's death in 2012, his influence on my life and work has continued. The lessons he taught me, the values he instilled in me, and the vision he shared with me continue to guide my decisions and actions. Before I end this lecture, I would like to recount my last meeting with Prof. This was a couple of months before he passed on. With the help of Colonel Atta and Colonel Lawson, I had managed to sneak past Mr. Martin Newman and Mr. Bebaku Mensah, the two tigers at the door. So I used to deal with Colonel Lawson and get in there and make my request, and then Prof would call Mr. Newman and he would wonder, how did you get in here? So anyway, I'd gone to see Prof to fight for some additional resources for the NCC election year activities. I met Prof in a very sad mood. He was not happy. He talked to me about very vicious media attacks, some from people who knew him better. And I said, oh, Prof, but you shouldn't be listening to the media or reading this stuff. And you need to detach completely. I then added that they would only appreciate you when you're gone. I meant after his tenure. I had no way of knowing that would be my last physical meeting with Prof. After Prof's death, I was put on the funeral committee, and I was part of those working on publications, compiling all his tributes from the many diverse sources into the tribute book and editing them. What struck me was the most beautiful tributes Prof received, submitted by some of the very same people we had discussed attacking him in the media shortly before he died. And I learned a huge lesson. To serve well in public service, you must do right by God, by conscience, and by the law. You must be ready to suffer the attacks of people from the lenses of current affairs. But you must be certain in the knowledge that history will always vindicate the just. I held these lessons closely in my time. As I conclude these reflections on Professor John Evans Atta Mills, the man, the teacher, and the president, I am struck by the timeless relevance of his example. In a world that often seems to reward cynicism over idealism, self-interest over service, and division over unity, Professor Mills's life stands as a beacon of what is possible when leadership is rooted in character, guided by principle, and dedicated to the common good. One of the most remarkable aspects of Prof's life was its integration. Prof was not three different people, the man, the teacher, and the president, but one person whose character, values, and principles remained consistent across all roles and contexts. The humility that characterized him as a man informed his approach as a teacher and shaped his style as president. This integration is perhaps Prof's most important lesson for all of us, but especially for young people who are still forming their identities and choosing their paths. Prof showed us that it is possible to be authentic and consistent, to maintain one's principles while adapting to different roles and responsibilities. As we honor Prof's memory, we must also commit ourselves to continuing his work. This is not just the responsibility of those who knew him personally, but of all Ghanaians and all Africans who share his vision of a better future. For young people, it is important to pursue excellence in your education and your work, to seek out mentors and to be willing to learn, to take advantage of opportunities to serve others, and commit yourself to building the kind of society that Professor Mills envisioned. For leaders at all levels, it is important that we invest in young people, that we create opportunities for their development and advancement, that we lead with integrity and humility, and to remember that leadership is ultimately about service, not privilege. For all of us, we need to embody the values that Professor Mills exemplified: honesty in our dealings, compassion in our relationships, excellence in our work, and service in our communities. Professor Mills once said that, "My doors are always open. We'll make sure to provide the resources and make the necessary contacts. As a government, we will give you the fullest support." These words capture the essence of his approach to leadership and mentorship throughout his life. Even in death, Prof's doors remain open. His example continues to teach us, his vision continues to inspire us, and his legacy continues to challenge us to be better than we are. He remains our eternal teacher, showing us through his life what is possible when character meets opportunity, when principles guide power, and when service defines success. Prof understood that the ultimate measure of any generation is not what it accomplishes for itself, but what it makes possible for the next generation. He dedicated his life to ensuring that young people's dreams were not destroyed, but nurtured, supported, and given the opportunity to flourish. Today, as we face new challenges and new opportunities, we must ask ourselves, are we nurturing the dreams of our young people? Are we creating opportunities for them to serve and lead? Are we providing them with the education, the mentorship, and support they need to build a better future? Professor Mills would want us to answer these questions not just with words, but with actions. He would want us to open our doors as he opened his, to provide resources and support as he provided them, and to believe in young people as he believed in us. I have wondered many times, would Prof be happy with us, with me, with the current state of Ghana? I think Prof would be outraged at how we are permitting galamsey to damage our environments, our bodies, and our future. Prof would be sad at the level of lies and vitriol we hurl at each other daily in the media, especially online. The rabid partisanship would probably depress Prof. But Prof would also be happy that his wife, his son, and his family are thriving. They are still standing. Prof involved in party activities. Prof would be particularly elated that we have a first female vice president. He would also be very happy that across the political divide, NPP, NDC, CPP, all of them, we have an influx of young men and women, professionals and academics, embracing public service and politics. He would be happy that in spite of the rabid partisanship, our citizens are still engaged and not passive, and our democracy is still growing. Finally, Prof would be happy that other than a few pockets of unrest, Ghana is generally peaceful. Since his departure, there have been two very peaceful and uncontested changes of power democratically in 2016 and 2024. He would be happy that the losing candidates in both elections considered beautifully and put the nation ahead of self. In the sub-region and across the continent, Ghana still stands as a beacon of democracy and peace and is respected globally in the Committee of Nations. Asomdwehin would be happy. I end by expressing my immense gratitude to the J.A. Mills Memorial Heritage, who for the past 13 years have organized this annual lecture in honor of a truly great soul, and for giving me the honor of a lifetime by selecting me as a keynote speaker for today. May we all be worthy of Prof's trust. May we be faithful to his example, and may we be tireless in continuing the work that Prof started. May the memory of Professor John Evans Atta Mills forever be a blessing and a call to service. Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, and click on the bell for more updates.